If you were a phone maker like Apple and could only upgrade one thing on a phone, what would it be? Cameras? Processor? Software? Ooh, durability. Look, I imagine the answer is going to be different for all of us. For me, it's definitely the battery life. I've never met a single person who said, wow, I get too much battery life on my phone. But I have definitely met many people who've wanted more. And that brings me to the iPhone 14 series. I reviewed them all, the 14, the 14 Pro, the 14 Pro Max, and the 14 Plus. There are links in the description. But one thing I was curious about was the battery life, especially since the iPhone 13 series got such a big improvement in battery life over the iPhone 12 series. So, over the past few weeks, I ran various drain and charging tests, as well as had real-life experience using each phone, even with the always-on display. And here are my findings. A phone's battery life lands at an interesting crossroads. You have the physical and chemical limits of modern lithium batteries, as well as the clever software and processing optimizations that aim to make those batteries more efficient. Now, Apple doesn't disclose the size of the batteries inside their phones, and I kind of wish they did, because you'd realize that the batteries they use are relatively small compared to Android phones. And thanks to iFixit for the fastidious teardowns of the iPhone for this knowledge. Now, this isn't about me shaming Apple, but showing how much longevity they eke out of that battery through software optimizations and the efficiency of their A-series processors. In fact, last year's iPhone 13 Pro Max lasted longer on a single charge than any phone CNET has ever tested. That's more than the Asus ROG Phone 5, which is a gaming phone with a 6,000 milliamp hour battery. That's more than the Moto G Play, a very cheap phone with a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. But the problem with battery testing is that it's hard to compare battery life between phones, even from one iPhone to another. And those results don't always reflect how battery life will be for your particular phone and your daily life. So, at CNET, we run a few different tests to give us an idea about the battery life and the charging speed, as well as use the phones in real life to give you an idea of what you can expect. Obviously, if you're a phone reviewer who lives in San Francisco and works at CNET, your results might be similar to the ones I got. But most people aren't, which is good because that would be a little creepy. The first test I ran with each phone was an endurance test. For 45 minutes, I played video games. Some of them were online, others were not, as well as watched videos, scrolled through social media like TikTok and Instagram, and made a video call. During that time, the iPhone 14's battery decreased 10%, the 14 Plus dropped 5%, the 14 Pro lost 8%, and the 14 Pro Max went down 7%. For comparison, the last phones I reviewed before the new iPhones were the Galaxy Z Fold 4 and the Z Flip 4. When I ran the same test on the Z Flip 4, it dropped 14%, and the Z Fold 4, with its giant 7.6-inch screen, drained the battery 18%. And keep in mind, that phone has two screens, though really only one of them is on during this test. Now, the next test I ran is a charging test, and for 30 minutes I plugged in each iPhone and used the included cable that came in the box, as well as a fast charging brick. And I should say that the iPhone 14 series supports 20-watt fast charging, but that's not really fast, especially compared to like OnePlus, which supports 65-watt fast charging. And since the iPhones don't come with a power brick in the box, I bought a 20-watt plug bug from the company 12 South for this test. And here are the results. In 30 minutes, the iPhone 14 gained 42%, the 14 Pro added 48%, the 14 Pro Max gained 45%, and the 14 Plus added 43%. For comparison, the Galaxy Z Fold 4 gained 53%, but I should note that that phone supports 25-watt wired charging. And that brings me to our video playback test. Now, I've been with CNET for 6 years, and even before I joined to test a phone's battery, they played a video looped in airplane mode with the screen set at 50% brightness. In 2022, the test is pretty irrelevant, especially with display brightness and refresh rates being all over the place, and that software and chips now optimize for video playback. And for most people, well, most people watch streaming video. Why run this test, you say? Well, it allows us to compare Apple's claims as well as the results we got with the iPhone 13 series running the same test. So, here's what Apple claims. The iPhone 14 should make it 20 hours in video playback. And for me, it lasted 18 hours and 45 minutes. The 14 Pro is rated at 23 hours video playback and lasted 20 hours. The 14 Plus should last 26 hours and it lasted 25 hours. And the 14 Pro Max is rated for 29 hours of video playback and survives 26 hours and 15 minutes. These results also come up short compared to the iPhone 13 series, with the regular 13 lasting 21 hours and 51 minutes, the 13 Pro going 22 hours and 4 minutes, and the 13 Pro Max scoring an outstanding 31 hours and 19 minutes. I should also note that the 13 mini lasted 18 hours and 19 minutes, which is almost as long as the regular iPhone 14. And when it comes to real-life use, I found the results to be about the same. The 14 and 14 Pro both consistently lasted through a day, and I would typically need to charge it around 9 o'clock at night. Whereas the 13 and 13 Pro also made a day, but would last till about 10, maybe even 11 p.m. And this was despite them having a longer screen on time compared to the 13 and 13 Pro. Very curious. Now the 14 Plus and 14 Pro Max easily lasted a day and a half for me, and both got through 2 full days on a single charge several times. Last, there have been a lot of murmurs about the always-on display on the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, and that these always-on displays drain the battery. So, I charged both phones to 100% and left them on my desk with the always-on display enabled. After 6 hours, the 14 Pro dropped 4% and the 14 Pro Max lost 2%. I ran the same scenario again, but this time turned off the always-on display, and the 14 Pro dropped 4% and the 14 Pro Max dropped 3%. Essentially the same. Let me say this, and let me be very clear. Since the always-on display is customizable, I can see where some people might get slightly more battery drain from it than others. And I think it really just depends on how you have it set up and what photo is on that screen. But this doesn't dissuade me from using the always-on display. So, at the end of the day, what does all this mean? What does it mean, Patrick? Well, let me tell you. The iPhone 14 series gets good battery life. But in our test, it's definitely a step behind the battery life on the iPhone 13 series. Is this something you should worry about? For most people, no. I don't think it is. And let me say, if you're an early adopter and you are doing a year-over-year upgrade, yeah, the battery life is like going from an A+ to an A-. But if you're coming from an older iPhone, even like an iPhone 12 series, you're going to get a phone with a better battery life, along with a bunch of other improvements. And if you're rocking an old phone, let's say like an iPhone 8 Plus, this is going to be night and day difference when it comes to battery life and, well, pretty much everything else on the phone. Now, I do hope that Apple does adopt faster charging speeds for the iPhone in the future. Maybe it's not at the level that OnePlus is doing, but I'll take what I can get. And that's where my battery journey ends, at least for the moment. And now I want to hear from you. Do you have a new iPhone 14, 14 Plus, 14 Pro, 14 Pro Max? How has the battery life been so far? Let us know in the comments. Also, we do these Apple Stuff videos every week. Also, let us know what you'd like to see in future videos. And last, do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, and thank you for watching.